Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Oh, it hurts me to make this video. It really, really does. David Gaider, who for me is the most fun person to follow on Blue Sky, bar none. Like he'll go weeks without posting anything, and then all of a sudden, bam, he'll come out with this crazy thread that's really, really cool and interesting and provides some really fascinating perspectives on game development and Bioware's history and all that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy watching his Blue Sky page. He's come out with a new thread, and the motivation for it was a friend came up to him and was like, hey, with all these layoffs occurring, surely that means we're about to see a bunch of new studios popping up, right? And David Gaider, of course, said, no, that's absolutely ridiculous. But hearing that made him say, you know what? I should probably document some of my journey from quitting Bioware to opening up Summer Fall Studios, which I'm pretty sure in the near future is going to do a Kickstarter for their second game, which is going to be a roguelike deck builder. So I'm definitely going to put a link to that down in the description. But his studio has been successful. So he's like, hey, I should probably document some of my journey, let people know this is kind of how things worked out. And in the process of doing that, he's on part 2 of the thread right now, and it talks extensively about his final months, I guess, at Bioware and what really led up to his exit. I think it sounds absolutely awful. I think it sounds absolutely awful. I think Bioware really screwed him over. I'm very disappointed, honestly, to see this, and it hammers home for me what I'm going to be honest. I'm always honest with y'all. What many people have been saying in the comments on my Veilguard videos. Bioware is dead. Bioware has long been dead. The Bioware you know doesn't exist anymore. Yada, yada, yada. To be honest with you, this thread and the information he puts in it makes that more real for me than any of the comments or conversations I've had regarding Dragon Age and Bioware leading up to Veilguard's release. And it kind of just feels like the final nail in the coffin after, of course, they let go of all the people who made Dragon Age great to begin with. Like, it just feels truly, truly dead. But anyway, let's go ahead. I'm going to dive in to his Blue Sky thread so you all can see the information, and I'll cut in every so often to give you my thoughts on the stuff that he provides. All right, so part 2, the road to Summerfall. I guess the best place to start is with leaving Bioware. Right off the bat, I'll say I enjoyed working there a lot until I didn't. I started in 1999 with Baldur's Gate 2 and ended in 2016, 2 years after shipping Dragon Age Inquisition and after spending a year on the game, which became Anthem. So I think it's worth noting, a lot of people associate David Gaider with Dragon Age, but he was actually with Bioware long before Dragon Age got started. So he was involved in Baldur's Gate 2, he was involved in Knights of the Old Republic, and then ultimately he ended up creating the world of Dragon Age and playing a major part in bringing the 3 games to life. And I guess some small part in even bringing the 4th one, Veilguard, to life as well. All right, moving on to the next part. Things at Bioware felt like they were at their height when the doctors, Ray and Greg, the original founders, were still there. So Ray and Greg were leading the company. I think they stayed until Mass Effect 3. If I remember correctly, I could be wrong, but if I remember correctly, Mass Effect 3 is kind of when they dipped out. And of course, right before then, they had basically sold the company to EA. But if I remember correctly, they sold the company to EA, but they still stayed on in a more of an advisory role. And then it was after Mass Effect 3 and the massive backlash where they kind of just completely bowed out. We made RPGs, full stop. We made them well. Sure, there were some shitty parts, some which I didn't realize how shitty they were until after I left, but I'd never worked anywhere else. To me, things like the bone-numbing crunch and the mismanagement were simply how things were done. I was insulated from a lot of it too, I think. On the Dragon Age team, I had my writers and we were a crack unit. And I had managers who supported and empowered me. Or indulged me. I'm not sure which, to be honest. It's funny that Mike Laidlaw becoming creative director was one of the best working experiences I had there, as initially it was one of the shitty things. You see, when Brett Knowles left in 2009, I felt like I was ready to replace him. This was kind of my project after all, and who else was there? So Brett Knowles now works, I believe, as a producer at Beamdog. I'm not sure what Beamdog is working on these days. Of course, they were involved in the enhanced editions for Baldur's Gate 2, and another really popular old school RPG that is escaping my mind right now. But I'm not sure what new game that might be working on. They were doing an MMO, Myth Force, that it didn't seem like did well. So I don't know if maybe they're going to be working on another CRPG. I would certainly love to see one from them. Well, it turned out this coincided with the Jade Empire 2 team being shut down, and their staff was being shuffled to the other teams. Mike had already been tapped to replace Brent. Mike, a writer, who I'd helped train. There wasn't even a conversation. When I complained, the reaction? Surprise. So this lets you know early on, for whatever reason, higher ups at Bioware didn't have much respect for David Gaider. They didn't think much of him, which is crazy. Which is more than a little bit crazy, but let's continue on. It was the first indication that Bioware's upper management just didn't think of me in that way. That lead writer was as far as I was ever getting in that company, and there was a way of doing things which involved buddy politics that I guess I just never quite keyed into. I was bitter, I admit it. But, like I said, this turned out well. Mike was the right pick. Damn it. He had charisma and drive, and he even won me over. We worked together well, and I think Dragon Age benefited for it. I think I'd still be at Bio or I stayed a lot longer, but then I made my first big mistake, leaving Dragon Age. Now, Mike Laidlaw has went on to do, I forgot the name of his freaking game. That came out in, 2025. Yeah, so they just had Eternal Strands come out. I haven't played it at all. But from what I heard, it was getting pretty decent reviews. Yeah, I see 9 out of 10 on Steam, 7 out of 10 on IGN, 4 out of 5 on Eurogamer. So it seems like it's pretty cool. Action adventure game developed and published by Yellow Brick Games. It didn't seem like it was my kind of game. Of course, you know, I like party-based games and games that focus a lot more on story and dialogue and things of that nature. So I skipped it. But for those of you who really like action adventure games that focus more on combat, might be something that's right up your alley. We'd finished Dragon Age Inquisition in 2014, and I was beginning to feel the burnout coming on. Dragon Age Inquisition had been a grueling project, and I really felt like there was only so long I could keep writing stories about demons and elves and mages before it started to become rote for me and felt a detriment to the project. Plus, for the first time, I had Trick Weeks, someone with the experience and willingness they could replace me. So I told Mike I thought it was time I moved on to something else, and he sadly let me go. So for a time, the question became which of the other two Bioware teams I'd move on to. So this is very interesting. I had always been under the impression that Gaider was still with the Dragon Age team and then basically had been forced out of Bioware while in that ecosystem. But apparently no. Apparently he was kind of already burnt out on Dragon Age and wanted to move on to something else, and then that's kind of where everything went wrong. I feel really bad for Trick Weeks. Obviously, they are one of the people who ended up getting let go by EA after Veilguard. I felt like the work that they had done to develop Solus was incredible. And even though, as I've already mentioned, I felt like there could have been a better job adding more layers to Solus and the type of person he became in Veilguard, I feel like considering the layer that they decided to stick with, it was done really, really well. And his ending was absolutely beautiful. And I attribute a lot of that to Trick. And so to see them kind of just thrown out on the street with little fanfare, and to see, so many people kind of dogpile on them with no respect or regard for all the amazing writing they had done in the past, I think it's wrong. I think it's really unfortunate, to be frank with you. Both needed a lead writer. Mass Effect Andromeda was just gearing up, and while I liked everyone out in Montreal, I didn't really want to move, so I joined the new project that the former Mass Effect team in Edmonton was cooking up, the one that became Anthem, but at the time was codenamed Dylan. That was a mistake. You see, the thing you need to know about Bioware is that for a long time, it was basically two teams under one roof. The Dragon Age team and the Mass Effect team. Run differently, very different cultures, may as well have been two separate studios, and they didn't get along. To be honest with you, this isn't rare in corporate culture. Like a lot of times, how positive your experience is working at a particular place is about your leader. It's about that immediate leadership, not even necessarily leadership all the way at the very top. And so if you have a good leader in IT, you can have a great experience there. And then at the exact same company, head over to marketing, a much weaker leader is there, and it creates a completely different type of culture where you really, really don't enjoy being there. And so I've definitely come to learn that just because somebody's come from a particular company and says, oh, I love it, it's a great culture, I had such a great time, people were nice, they were respectful, you got to consider, am I going to be in the same environment that that person was in? Because if I'm not, then it's very, very possible I'm going to have a completely different experience. And it seems like Bioware was definitely not the exception to this rule. The company was aware of the friction, and attempts to fix it had been going for years, mainly by shuffling staff between the teams more often. Yet this didn't really solve things, and I had no idea until I got to the Dylan team. The team didn't want me there at all. Worse, until this point, Dylan had been conceived as a kind of a beer and cigarettes hard sci-fi setting, a la Aliens, and I've been given instructions to turn it into something more science fantasy, a la Star Wars. Yet I don't think anyone told the team this, so they thought this change was my doing. Once again, comes down to leadership, because good leadership would have stepped in and made it clear, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. Gaider has been brought in to assist us in doing it, but it's my decision. And it's my decision because it's coming from higher up. So this is what we have to do. A leader like that would have hopefully made this whole situation much better, but because it didn't have that type of leadership, everybody was like, Gaider thinks he can jump over to our team and take control of everything and change everything that we've done, and that's just gonna make people feel even more resentful. This is bad leadership for sure. I kept getting feedback about how it was too Dragon Age, and how everything I wrote or planned was too Dragon Age. The implication being that anything like Dragon Age was bad. And yet this was a team where I was required to accept and act on all feedback. So I ended up iterating constantly. I won't go into detail about the problems, except to say it became clear this was a team that didn't want to make an RPG. Were very anti-RPG, in fact. Yet, they wanted me to wave my magic writing wand and create a Bioware quality story without giving me any of the tools I need to actually do that. I saw the writing on the wall. This wasn't going to work, so I called up my boss and said that I'd stick it out and try my best, but only if there was something waiting on the other side, where I could have more say as creative director. I wanted to move up. I was turned down flat. No hesitation. That said a lot. Even more when I was told that while I could leave the company if I wanted to, I wouldn't have any success outside of Bioware, but in blunter words. So I quit. That is so disgusting. And it's so disheartening to hear. Like, for a long-time Bioware fan, I started playing Bioware games when KOTOR came out. Right? And I went back and played all the games that came before. So for those of us who have been around since the beginning, we all know how massive an impact Gaider's work had on that studio. Now you can tell a person that, hey, this is where you're best at. Maybe for whatever reason, they didn't feel like he was a good creative director, right? I'm not trying to say that just because he wrote a bunch of great characters, that all of a sudden you should obviously put him in this leadership spot. That's not true. But I'm absolutely saying that based upon his track record with the company, he deserved more respect. He deserved to not be treated in the manner that's being described here. And the way this interaction is described makes it pretty clear that the resentment wasn't just among his peers, it was at the top. For whatever reason, there were people at the top of Bioware who strongly resented the man who you could argue was most responsible for a large part of their success. Keep in mind, look, when you look at the trailers and like the community and things going on, Mass Effect always seemed lit, right? Mass Effect always seemed like where things were popping, where the culture was at. I love Mass Effect. I love Mass Effect more than Dragon Age, to be honest with you. But the fact of the matter is, the Dragon Age game sold more. Dragon Age Inquisition sold more than any other Mass Effect games and the Legendary Edition. So to try to pretend that David Gaider is not someone who's supremely talented, when he put together the world that basically put the studio on its shoulders at one point, to try to just say, you could only be successful here. So if you want to leave, there's the door. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. And I'm so thankful that Summerfall Studios worked out for him, and it seems like it's doing well enough so that he never has to go back hat in hand and say, I'll accept whatever you'll give me. If you just want me to write, that's fine. Like, no, you should be in an environment that actually respects who you are and what you have to bring to the table. This is crazy. Was it easy? Hell no. I thought I'd end up buried under a cornerstone at Bio. Honestly, I like security. Sure, I dreamed of maybe starting my own studio, but that was a scary idea and I'd never pursued it. I had no idea where I was going to go or what I was going to do, but I wanted out. Which led me at home after my last day, literally having a nervous breakdown, wondering what kind of idiot gives up a good job. How is a writer, of all things, with no real interest in business, supposed to start his own studio? It felt apocalyptic. Within a year, however, I was on my way. Yeah, I haven't played Summerfall Studios' first game yet because with it just being a musical and everything, I felt like it wasn't really going to be up my alley. But everything I've heard about it, people were saying that actually, no, you should check it out, that it's a fantastic game with a lot of the elements that I personally like in RPGs. So I plan to absolutely check it out at some point. Now there was a thread where a couple of questions were asked about why there was so much conflict. So what do you think began the conflict between the Dragon Age and Mass Effect team? And Gaider says, I honestly have no idea. Competition for resources, I suppose. One team's plans were always being cut short because the other team suddenly needed all their team members for an upcoming release. And then a follow-up question, that makes sense. I can't imagine how it must feel to have your project sidelined or reduced because of another team. Do you think the Mass Effect team were more entitled because they perceived their franchise as having a bigger cultural impact? I never got that sense, though I was never in the meetings where these things were hashed out. They tended to always get what they needed. However, because EA always expected that each Mass Effect game had way more potential for huge sales than Dragon Age did. I especially feel that way. Like when you look at the way Dragon Age 2 was treated by Bioware and EA, with that very, very short deadline forcing them to essentially ship a broken product that a lot of people are disappointed in. Nothing like that happened with Mass Effect. They always had enough time. They always pretty much shipped exactly what they wanted to, which honestly, it's part of the reason why the ending for Mass Effect 3 was so disappointing for people. And yet then, even with that ending and the response, they were given the opportunity to do the Citadel DLC to try to make up for it and make it right. Whereas with Dragon Age 2, a lot of the stuff that was broken and not done right, it just stayed that way. And they released a couple of pieces of content to add, some more things you could play in, and then they just moved on to Inquisition. So I definitely feel like the way Bioware treated the Dragon Age series as opposed to the way they treated the Mass Effect series was very, very different in an unfortunate manner. And then the last comments that he responded to, this one on the original thread, wow, this makes so much awful shitty sense. It has seemed to me from the outside that there's been a preference for Mass Effect over Dragon Age. The launch of Dragon Age, the Veilguard, and the residual layoffs seem more of a hit job from inside than just a troll problem. To which David Gaider says, while I was at BioWare, EA always preferred Mass Effect, straight up. Their marketing team liked it more. It was modern. It had action. They never quite knew what to do with DA, and whenever DA outperformed ME got the excuses. If you ask me, it was always just shy of the axe since Dragon Age Origins. And then Kayla Elizabeth, popular content creator, asks, can I ask a follow-up question? Is them not knowing what to do with Dragon Age the reason why every Dragon Age game was different? While I love all the games, I've always wondered where that originated from. In which case, David responded, maybe in part. I'd say the biggest reason was that while I was there, the Bioware teams were bad at overreaction. They take the feedback criticism to heart, both our own and the fans, and generally fix that, but also overcorrect it. And then there was EA's influence on top of that, yes. And that's it. That's all the information regarding David Gaider's split from Bioware. Just super upsetting, super unfortunate. If you're on Blue Sky, I do post there every so often under Slandered, so definitely give your boy a follow. I'm pretty sure there should be a link down in the description for you all to join up. And yeah. And this, if it wasn't already clear, to me it's pretty clear now. The Bioware that made incredible games that I love, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, KOTOR, Jade Empire, Mass Effect, and Dragon Age, dead. It's absolutely dead. That doesn't mean that this upcoming iteration of Mass Effect is necessarily going to be bad. I still have hopes. Gamble is there, and it seems like he's passionate about making this the very best product that it can be. And so we really have no choice but to put our faith in him. But I'm not, there's only a couple of developers I feel real loyalty to. Like I feel loyalty towards Owlcat, and I had loyalty towards Bioware. In fact, Bioware was the first ever dev that I felt loyalty to, where every single thing you put out, most likely I'm going to purchase, and I'm going to tell other people about it, And so to see them crumble like this is really unfortunate, and I'm definitely past that now. I'm no longer the type of person who's going to say, oh, Bioware's doing it while I'm all over it. Nah. This is a totally different group, and unfortunately, it's really hard to not only trust the quality of what they're going, but also, to be frank, trust how they're going to treat developers who are involved with producing these products. Like, if Mass Effect does well, are they going to take that as an opportunity to shred a bunch of more developers so that EA's, stock price can look great on the next investor call? It's just ugly. It's just ugly all the way around. Anyway, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed it as much as you can possibly enjoy information like this. Appreciate you all stopping through. If you did like it, hit that like button. I'd appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit that bell so you don't miss any content. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.